It is a Monday episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and OMP is a Memphis Grizzly. What does that mean for Jamai Mashack? And why in the world is Santi Aldama being yelled at online about Spain being eliminated from EuroBasket? We're going to talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax. So happy to have you with me on this episode of the pod. DeMichael Cole wrapping up his pre-NBA season craziness vacation today. So it is once again I flying solo with you, and I am so grateful, so happy that you have made the choice to spend the next 30 or so minutes talking Memphis Grizzlies basketball with me here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is closer than you think. It's literally happening right now. And right now, new customers can bet just $5 if your bet wins. You'll get $300 in bonus bets. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can find us at Locked On Grizzlies. Hopefully you join us each and every time an episode drops. Good news, this is the return of the everyday nature of the podcast. We took about a 6-week break there. It was about 3 episodes a week every other day. You got to hear my voice or DeMichael's voice. You got to see my ugly mug or DeMichael's very handsome mug a few times a week. But now we're back to each and every time an episode drop being just about every day in preparation for the 2025-2026 NBA season. Lots to discuss this week. We're going to start today off, though, with a little bit of surprising Memphis Grizzlies roster movement. And I'll explain why it was surprising as we go through the program here today. But the first positive surprise of the program, the Memphis Grizzlies today, this is per Grizzlies PR, announced the team signed forward Olivier-Maxence Prosper to a 2-way contract per team policy. The details were not disclosed. Prosper, at 6'8", 215 pounds, has appeared in 92 games, 5 starts, and has averaged 3.5 points, 2.2 rebounds in 10 minutes in 2 seasons with the Dallas Mavericks since he was selected 24th overall in the 2023 NBA draft. This young man started all 25 of his G League appearances with the Texas Legends a couple of seasons ago, and he averaged 18.3 points, 7.7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal in about 33 minutes of play. He played 2 seasons at Marquette after beginning his collegiate season at Clemson, born in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. That is OMP. Interesting prospect to discuss because I think that he provides a lot of what the Memphis Grizzlies need at this time, especially in a 2-way contracted player. If you watch him play, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an OMP expert, but I am going to acknowledge that I've watched a lot of him because he played at Clemson. I remember him from Clemson, and then he went to Marquette. I remember him at Marquette. And then he played for the Dallas Mavericks. And I, through the draft process, watching his film, going into his time with the Mavs, obviously being in the Grizzlies division, I know a little bit about this young man in terms of how he plays the game. He struggles scoring the basketball. There's a reason why OMP is no longer a Dallas Maverick. There's a reason why this is a guy who the Mavericks were willing to move on from the way that they did. And there's a reason why this guy was signed to a 2-way deal by the Grizzlies as opposed to filling some roster spot somewhere else in the NBA. He has flaws. And his major flaw is he can't put the ball in the hoop at the NBA level. When he has athletic advantages, when he has the capacity to cut to the rim and be a level above most of his competition, if not all of his competition, depending on the night in the G League, this is a dude that can play above the basket, get to the rim at will. He can score in those spaces. But when his athleticism is negated, when he's around other players that have comparable physical gifts, the basketball skill, there's a sizable gap. And because of that, obviously at the NBA level, the most talented and skilled players in the entire world, he is not able to stick in that space. He is still young, very worth a flyer as a bigger wing at 6'8", 215, a little bit smaller than G.G. Jackson for comparison's sake. And one thing with his frame and one thing with his athleticism that he does do well is he defends. He defends the bat. He defends on the point. He defends off the ball. He has a frame that most teams are looking for from a combo forward type of player. The 1.0 steals number in those 33 minutes of play a couple of years ago, that stands out to the Memphis Grizzlies, I'd imagine. The length that OMP is able to play with, that stands out for the Memphis Grizzlies, if I had to guess. And I think that this is a guy who a lot of NBA teams were intrigued by because of his size, because of his capacity to move, because of how he can do a variety of things on the basketball court that you can't teach, right? You can't teach being 6'8", 215 pounds. You can't teach the capacity to play both the 4 and the 3 and the 5, depending on the matchup and the scheme that you're lining up and running. And that is something that OMP is capable of. He has positional versatility and theory that most, if not all, players, or coaches, I should say, would want to try to maximize. However, when you struggle as mightily as OMP does from the field, a career 39.6% shooter overall, never mind three-point shooting. He's a career 26% three-point shooter. But when you're shooting less than 40% from the floor, period, that's simply not good enough. That's not an NBA player. That is not somebody that, if you have serious dreams of being a competitive basketball team, that you're able to trot out on a night in, night out basis. But you know what the Grizzlies are able to do with that two-way contract? They are able to give him opportunity to show that he is able to be more than a two-way contracted player. And I think that the reputation that the Memphis Grizzlies have built over the last couple of years, utilizing that two-way contract in such a way, is a reason why OMP made the choice that he did. Because apparently other teams were interested, understandably so. Again, you can't teach his size, you can't teach his frame, you can't teach his athleticism. The Grizzlies have taken two-way contracted players on numerous occasions and converted them to full roster members. Jay Huff, Scottie Pippen Jr., G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr. The list goes on and on. There are numerous players that were put in those situations by Memphis that went on with opportunity and development to become fully rostered, guaranteed money members of the Memphis Grizzlies later on down the road. OMP certainly sees that track record of developmental success, plus combining that with the opportunity to show what you can do. You can develop all you want. You can dominate at the G League level, be an all G League competitor, but that's not the NBA. And if you don't have the capacity to take that ability to dominate at the developmental level and apply it to being an effective rotation player, we'll talk more about what that means with Santi Aldama to close out the show here in a little bit. But if you can't take that experience and mesh it and meld it into finding your niche in the NBA without being a complete liability on the other end, you're probably going to be playing overseas for a team in China or Europe at some point. And that's not to knock those guys. Obviously, that's a fine way to make a living. But all of these dudes have given their options, except for maybe Jonas Valanciunas, want to play in the NBA. A vast majority of them, at the very least. I'm sure if you gave OMP the choice, he would much rather have a guaranteed NBA contract playing among the other 420-some best players in the entire world, as opposed to the alternative. With the Grizzlies, he can combine the developmental track record and precedent with the opportunity to show what he can do. He'll have every chance to put that frame to work, to develop his basketball skill, and become, whether it's in Memphis or somewhere else, a fully rostered member of an NBA team again. So he sees what the Grizzlies are providing in terms of that opportunity, and he wants to make the most of it, I believe. So how do you feel about OMP as the latest Grizzlies two-way contract? That means all the two-way deals are filled. PJ Hall, Javon Small. What does that mean for Jamai Mashack? That's what we're going to talk about next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Why do I love FanDuel? It's because it fits however I want to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team, like the Commanders for me, or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And it's also quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sunday experience. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So I mentioned a moment ago, all of the two-way contracts are now filled with Olivier-Maxence Prosper signed to the Grizzlies. OMP. I think I've called him OSP. I've called him, sorry, OMP. I'm going to do my best to stick with that. OMP is here. The Grizzlies have all their two-way contracts filled. Jamai Mashack, not among those three. And Mashack has become a bit of a fan favorite among Grizzlies faithful because of the defensive tenacity and effort that he plays with. Zach Kleiman has said time and time again, he is looking for dogs. Arr, arr. And Mashack is perhaps the definition of a dog when it comes to his defensive tenacity. Time and again in all the analysis of the acquisition of Mashack by the Grizzlies, you heard people like Jay Billis of ESPN and others saying this might be the best defensive player in the entire draft. And yet now that Mashack, a second-round pick, is not on a two-way deal, he seems destined for the Memphis Hustle. Now, when I say what about Mashack, that doesn't mean that he's going to be leaving in free agency. The Grizzlies have control of his draft rights because they use a second-round selection on him. Because of that, wherever he goes, when it comes to the NBA, the Grizzlies have first right of refusal in terms of how they utilize him, which is why the hustle is the most likely outcome for him given his current situation. But why Mashack in that area, the Exhibit 10 contract perhaps, where he gets a little bit more money to be a true G League player this coming season? Why Mashack in that space? Why not him on the two-way? Because OMP does a lot of what Mashack can do in a different way. OMP has a defensive frame that is quite impressive. OMP has the skill set to do basically whatever he wants on the basketball court because of his size. Mashack, important to remember, 5 inches shorter. OMP has positional versatility as a front court player. He can play the 3. He can play the 4. That's where he spent most of his time in the NBA to this point with the Mavericks. OMP can play the 4, but he can also play the 5, depending on the matchup. Mashack is very positionally limited as a 6'3" guard that doesn't really have point guard skills. So you're looking at a guy who's a smaller Tony Allen, essentially. And obviously, Tony Allen most certainly has that dog in him. I'm not belittling the grindfather by any stretch of the imagination. But you're looking at a situation where Mashack has the capacity to do a lot of what you want OMP to do, but he doesn't have the same ceiling. He doesn't have the physical tools, the physical gifts. The Grizzlies have been interested in OMP for some time. They tried to trade for OMP, was the report from DeMichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal and Locked On Grizzlies, as well as others. OMP was on the radar of the Grizzlies when it became clear that Dallas was ready to move on. They were just able to sign him to a two-way contract instead of having to complete a trade. And it's important to point out that Dallas was probably going to have to pay the Grizzlies to take that contract in the form of a second-round pick, which is why the waiving happened and why Mashack was able to join outright on that two-way contract. Mashack is already under team control, and he lacks the positional versatility that OMP has. That's the difference. And isn't that the darndest thing? If you put the heart of Mashack in the body of OMP, you might have something there, ladies and gentlemen. If you put the intensity, the tenacity, whatever dog in them vernacular you want to utilize, OMP maybe doesn't have it quite as much as Mashack. But you know what Mashack wishes he had from OMP? 6'8", 215 pounds. The athleticism, the talent, the physicality, the positional versatility in the front court, that holds greater value than what Mashack currently provides in, again, admittedly, potentially elite defensive point of attack energy. But he isn't able to provide much else. Plus, he's not able to provide much else right now in terms of versatility. Now, does that mean you give up on the young man? Of course not. The Grizzlies drafted him for a reason. They want to see him develop. The same reason that OMP made the choice to come to the Memphis Grizzlies in free agency on the two-way deal. It's the same reason that Mashack should be excited he's heading to South Haven. It's the development system of the Grizzlies. Now, Taylor Jenkins is gone. Tuomas Isalo remains. He's now the head basketball coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. Could the development system look a little bit different? Perhaps. It's possible. But I do want to give Isalo the benefit of the doubt. At least this past year, he was a part of that development system. He was a part of helping these guys move along and get better. And Mashack will improve. He may not be around the Memphis Grizzlies as much as he originally thought as a possible two-way guy, but he's in the program. He's going to be given opportunity to play. And that perhaps more than anything should be what has people excited for Mashack. If the issue for him is he has a loose handle, if the issue for him is he's not able to hit the three consistently, if the issue for him is you see him as a one-trick pony that can be taken advantage of on the other end of the court offensively, work on those skills in the far less bright lights of South Haven, Mississippi with the Memphis Hustle. He's going to be given opportunity to play on an every other day or every day, depending on the back-to-back basis, that he simply wouldn't have with the Memphis Grizzlies. OMP is going to be able to practice with the Grizzlies more regularly as a two-way player. OMP is going to be on the bench more regularly. I do think you'll see OMP give an opportunity that Mashack probably would love to have. But again, what position do you play Jamai Mashack at right now if he is a true NBA player? Do you play a shooting guard who can't shoot at the two? We've seen how that works with a much better NBA defender in Tony Allen. And the league has changed since 2012. Imagine what that would look like now. Lou Dort has an offensive game that has evolved. But it's important to remember that Lou Dort spent a lot of time in the G League and on the bench for the Oklahoma City Thunder over the first year or two of his career. Could Mashack be the next Lou Dort? Maybe. They had similar defensive profiles coming out of school, and you can argue that Mashack has a better defensive profile coming out of school and into the professional ranks than Lou Dort did. So there's precedent for the way that Memphis is approaching this Mashack choice, even though it may not be the most popular thing among Grizzlies fans. There's going to be people that want the dog on the bench at all times. But again, if he's sitting there just watching, how much better is he actually getting? With OMP, he has NBA experience. Plus, you've got a guy who can do a lot of different things in terms of versatility, eat minutes in a variety of spots. Mashack doesn't have that versatility yet. Go to the Memphis Hustle. Work on your handle. Work on your ability to facilitate offense, even as a secondary facilitator. Doesn't need to be a point guard. He'll probably never be a point guard. But he can be a guy that makes better reads off of that initial set starting and getting kicked to him on the perimeter. He can become a player that is not someone that the opposing team can just point at and say, we don't have to worry about him. He's not going to be a problem. We can help off of him. We can close down the lane more aggressively. We want him to be the guy that shoots the ball. We will happily give him space to create his own shot because we're fairly confident even once the shot is created, it is not going through the hoop. I don't want that for Mashack, and neither do you. His best chance at developing his game is through the G League system, starting there and working his way up. OMP gives Memphis more versatility. Mashack's not there yet, but that doesn't mean that he won't be down the road. Unfortunately for Mashack, what he'll never be able to be is what OMP is in terms of his size and positional versatility. How are you feeling about Mashack likely heading to the Memphis Hustle outright, not on a two-way deal, at least to start the season? Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. Let me know what you're thinking, and obviously you can let us know in the comments as well. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode of the show talking about Santi Aldama getting blamed for Spain's departure from EuroBasket. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, closing out this Monday edition of the show. So grateful that you're with me. Very happy to have you here. Friendly reminder, starting today, we are back to 5 episodes a week. Your team each and every day once more. Michael Cole should be back with us tomorrow. A couple of dynamic duo writing again shows before my week gets a little bit busier. The day job being teaching and coaching. As the week goes on, things get a little bit more hectic. So you'll probably see DeMichael to close out this week, but I'm happy to be here with you today and the next couple of days here on Locked On Grizzlies as we get back into our 5 shows a week groove. Somebody who's guaranteed to be on the Memphis Grizzlies full-time roster isn't OMP, isn't Jamai Mashack. It is Santi Aldama. And Santi Aldama in Spain unceremoniously ousted from EuroBasket, and folks were looking for a guy to blame. And Santi Aldama was one of the ones that bore the brunt of those complaints. And for anybody that pays attention to the Memphis Grizzlies, that's not too surprising because fans like to blame Santi Aldama for a variety of things. He's kind of like Jaren Jackson Jr. in that way. Jaren gets a lot of the blame with foul trouble and rebounding. And I want to stress, these are things that obviously Jaren can improve at. Santi Aldama can certainly improve with his defensive effort. Desmond Bane agrees with that, if you remember back to their blow-up that they had on the bench this past season. Santi has his flaws, but the vitriol that I saw in terms of blaming Santi for the way that tournament ended for the Spanish national team, I just thought that was pretty wild, a bridge too far. Spain is far from their glory. Ricky Rubio, the Gasol brothers, none of those dudes are coming through the door, right? When Santi Aldama is your one NBA player that you've got, and he is an NBA player that is a starter when multiple guys, or at least one guy, but likely multiple guys, are out due to injury, he's a true reserve. He's the 6th or 7th man on a middle-of-the-road Western Conference team that's hoping to be better. What did you expect? Why are you blaming Santi Aldama for being Santi Aldama? Now, if you want to blame coaching, maybe spread the love a little bit more. No, don't put so much on Santi's shoulders. Sure, I could see that. But if you're looking at what Giannis is doing for Greece as they eliminated Israel in the tournament recently, and how Giannis, I think it was 37 points, 10 rebounds, Santi's never going to be able to do that. You know why? Because Santi Aldama is not Giannis. Giannis is one of the top 5 players on the planet. He might be number 3. And we're talking about a reality where folks are mad at Santi Aldama because he's not able to carry his team past another opponent that has similar, if not better, talent. Santi gets paid the way he's paid, and Santi gets viewed the way he gets viewed by the market in the NBA because of the skills that he provides. We talked about how OMP is lacking basketball skill. Santi Aldama is not lacking basketball skill. He has a solid outside jumper. He has a better handle than someone for his size usually has. He has tools, especially offensively, that if he does have athletic shortcomings, he's able to make up for it because of his level of basketball ability, basketball-specific skill. He can shoot the 3. He could do things against NBA reserves. In no way, shape, or form should that mean that he is the best player on a national team that has expectations of making it far in an international tournament. That is not fair to Santi. Your expectations are skewed. Can Santi Aldama do things better? Sure. I'm sure they wish he had rebounded a little bit more successfully. I'm sure they wish his decision-making process was a little bit cleaner. But be mad at the Spanish development system that the best guy that you can get on your roster for an important European tournament is Santi Aldama. Santi is exactly what he is. He is a good NBA reserve. His ceiling is probably NBA 6th man. His floor is 9th or 10th guy. Probably a little bit better than that, 8th guy. So you're looking at this dude who is an NBA 20-minute-a-night guy, maybe scores 8 or 9 points a game on average. And you're asking him to be your star, to be the guy that carries you when Luka Doncic and Giannis and all these other guys are Nikola Jokic, literally 3 of the top 4 or 5 players in the entire world are playing in this tournament. And you want Santi to be that dude for your team and you expect him to carry the load? That was going to fail from the very beginning. So if you went into this tournament hoping from a Grizzlies perspective that Santi was going to improve, I think that you should be happy. You should be thrilled, if you ask me, because Santi did improve, because he benefits from being put in those situations. He's not going to be asked to be that guy for the Grizzlies. Even when he is on a mostly reserved unit, he's going to play next to a Ty Jerome. He's going to play next to a Jaren Jackson Jr. more than likely, a Ja Morant. He's going to have other dudes that are clearly more significant to the team's success than him. When Santi is that guy, even in a situation in FIBA where obviously not all of those players are NBA players, a lot of them are now, though. And if they have a system that is able to limit what you're capable of, and you're the focal point of a scouting report, Santi Aldama is never the focal point of an NBA scouting report. Why would he be? There's lots of people on the court better than Santi Aldama. The Spanish national team has to say that Santi Aldama is their best player. How did you think it was going to end? So if you're Spain, maybe you're salty. And, I guess you can cry big, ugly tears if you want. But as somebody that follows the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm thrilled for Santi because he was given an opportunity to grow his game. And from what I saw, he did. He grew as a leader. And hopefully he's going to take those experiences that he got from EuroBasket and translate them in the next few weeks as training camp gets started, turn them into positive fuel for a season best, a career best season for Santi Aldama. I think that's in the cards for him. I think that's possible. I am more optimistic about Santi coming out of EuroBasket than appears the nation of Spain is. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X. How are you feeling about Santi Aldama as EuroBasket comes to a close for him? And obviously the season approaches for him and his Memphis Grizzlies teammates. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. A friendly note, the Locked On NBA Top 100 is here, voted on by the NBA hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network, such as myself and DeMichael Cole. Our Top 100 was formed by experts that cover these teams and players every day. Find the full list on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't miss our reaction to where Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and other potential Memphis Grizzlies players landed. I'm assuming those two were on the list. Obviously, the list went live today. We're going to talk more about where those guys landed tomorrow on the show. And surely the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be well represented on this list. My wonderful colleagues over at Locked On Podcast Network, NBA podcasters. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Locked On NBA team hosts. You wouldn't like me when I'm frustrated, when I'm perturbed. I'm sure you're not going to undersell and undervalue the Memphis Grizzlies. Surely the small market team that barely made the playoffs last year, surely they are going to be a priority in your hearts and minds. And if they're not, you're going to hear from me about it. Maybe DeMichael will be able to talk me off the ledge if I'm too angry. But we'll start talking about how the top 100 played out for the Grizzlies on tomorrow's show. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of the podcast. It is much appreciated. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Make sure that you are, again, liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Make us a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. I know DeMichael appreciates it. I most certainly appreciate it. Hopefully you're an everydayer at this point, checking out the show whenever we are here in our little corner that is of the internet, that is Locked On Grizzlies. Top 100 list analysis when it comes to the Grizzlies tomorrow. Until then, hopefully you have a great start to your week. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies. See you tomorrow. See you.